All right, everyone, welcome to our lesson over SOAPSTone, where we're going to be analyzing purpose of speeches. This is particularly relevant for our journey in our mock trial as we're becoming lawyers to give opening and closing statements. So I want us to look at some example speeches, and then we'll look at an example closing statement to help us prepare for this. So SOAPSTone is an acronym that stands for different elements that will help us develop our arguments and our speeches more effectively. So let's get started. The S in SOAPSTone stands for speaker. So you as the speaker, yes, you're important, but when we're observing other speeches, what assumptions can we make about the speaker based on their text or their speech, about their gender, their class, their emotional state, and what evidence do we have to support this? So when we're writing our own speeches, we're going to want to be conscious of what we are conveying about ourselves as people when we're giving our opening and closing statements. So here's an example from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and you can see in the red sections are what I highlighted that really bring out him as a speaker. So for example, when he says, "A new nation conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal," he's alluding to the Declaration of Independence there, right? So it tells us that he's patriotic. He is proud of his country. That this nation, when he reads the word nation, he's very much keeping the idea in mind of our country. He's patriotic. Again, you can see his values as he gives his speech. Our next element of SOAPSTone is occasion. Occasion is the context of why the speech is being given. So how does the speaker frame the occasion or the context? Why is the speech being given at all? And so we're going to be aware of our occasion specifically with the mock trial in terms of why are we giving that speech. It's not just because Lenny's on trial, it's because we want to convince the jury of our position. So here's, again, the same example with Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war. When he says that, that gives us some historical context as to when the speech was given. And then he also says, "We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives." So now we know this is happening during the Civil War. This is a ceremony that he's giving a speech at to honor people who have died. And he mentions the word honor dead, so he's really playing up the idea that they are trying to honor and give credit to those who have sacrificed their lives for the Civil War. Next, in our SOAPSTone acronym, we have audience. The audience is to whom the speech is directed. So very obvious, but also maybe implicitly. So it's not enough to say that anyone who hears the speech is the audience, but you have to think about the relationship between the speaker and the audience. What assumptions are the speaker making about the audience based on the text? So you're also going to be thinking that our audience is going to be our jury. Our jury is going to consist of parents. For our parents, it might have been a long time since they've read Of Mice and Men. So keeping that in the back of our minds when we're developing our opening and closing statements will be really key, because they're not going to know all the information that you do because you just read the book. Going back to the Gettysburg Address, you can see how he shows his awareness of audience here. When he calls the men who've died brave, he's really playing up to those people who lost family members, making them feel like, hey, my son or daughter or brother or cousin did not die in vain, but he died because they were brave. Again, see here that we highly resolve that these dead shall have not died in vain. He's really trying to comfort his audience because he knows that they're mourning the loss of their families. He says it's fitting and proper that we should honor them, right? That they are worthy of our praise and our recognition. Again, playing into the audience's mourning, the feeling that they're having of the loss of their families, but also giving them kind of a sense of hope and peace about the situation. The P stands for purpose. So this is the intended effect of the speech. What kind of emotional reaction does the speaker want to make the audience have? What is the overall aim? So with our mock trial presentation, the opening and closing statements, they have different purposes, both the opening and the closing. The opening is to kind of tell the story of what happened and let the jury know, here's what we're going to be revealing through our witnesses. Here's the case we're trying to build. And then the concluding statement is that chance to persuade and get the jury to determine the verdict that you want in the trial. Again, back to Abraham Lincoln. You can see his purpose is made clear. on that underlined section. Again, he's talking about dedicating Gettysburg to the people who have died, and again, hoping that they will not have died in vain, that they give birth to a new freedom. So his purpose is to not only honor those who have died, but to remind the people who are living that we are fighting for a good reason, that the Civil War isn't just happening for no reason, but that we're striving towards freedom for our country and for those who were previously enslaved. Next is S, subject. This is different from the purpose. It's more like a theme statement or like a one-word meaning for the speech, and then kind of building a statement around it. So for example, I pulled out specific elements of the text in our Gettysburg Address, and I noticed a lot of things related to death and new nation and the idea of a country coming together, birth, freedom. So those were kind of the big things that I noticed in my analysis of this speech. So it's possible that, here are some example subjects, statements. If we have the idea of love, love is the most important, but sometimes the most painful emotion. Same thing for knowledge. Knowledge means nothing without action based upon what we've learned. So those are ways to take a subject idea and turn it into a statement. Going back to our example, I might say that while Abraham Lincoln believes death has been finalized, death is always for a purpose, or our country is being reborn, or our country is being resurrected. So those would be the subjects for this particular speech. The last thing we need to know in SOAPSTone is tone. Tone is the attitude the speaker has towards his or her subject. So what emotional sense can we take away from the piece? Does it stay consistent, or does the speaker's feelings kind of shift and change as they're giving the speech? So this is where we're going to consider lids, diction, word choice, syntax, sentence structure, imagery, that kind of points to the attitude of the speaker. So going back to our example with the Gettysburg Address, I noticed the diction of the word consecrate, the idea of honored dead, using diction like devotion, the allusion to the Constitution when he says that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That's alluding to the Declaration. And so for me, I really thought his tone was very somber at first and eventually ended with encouragement and trying to give hope to his audience. So a hopeful tone towards the end. All right, so that's kind of our overview of SOAPSTone. Your next step is to take this information we've learned and apply it to the closing statement by Atticus Finch that I've pulled out as an example for you before we start writing our own. Okay, let me know if you have questions.